Many in the Black community, if I'm being honest with you, because I want to be, believe that you are being used as a pawn by the right and that you're a charlatan of sorts.
He's not a Republican.
I don't think there's any evidence I've been co-opted by anyone, and I think that that's an ad hominem tactic people use to not address really the important conversations we're having here.
Political author and analyst Coleman Hughes was recently met with some intense hostility, specifically from Sunny Hostin on The View, as he appeared on the show to promote his new book, The End of Race Politics: Arguments for a Colorblind America. At a time when the culture in America has essentially rejected colorblindness, instead embracing an almost obsessive focus on race and how we differ from one another, I honestly wasn't shocked that he was met with that kind of vitriol. We'll get back to that portion of the exchange in just a minute. But first, I do think it's actually important to understand Coleman as a person and the argument he's trying to make. In the interest of full disclosure, though, I do have to admit that I'm a fan of Coleman's, even though he and I have some disagreements. He's more supportive of Israel's war on Gaza, as an example. On some issues, he definitely leans to the right of me. But I actually find him to be thoughtful. He makes thought-provoking arguments in good faith. And I don't know about you, but I've been increasingly bored with shows that have default ideological talking points that hosts never deviate from. It's a mindless snooze fest. Sometimes Coleman's analysis on certain current events challenge my own, and I find that to be a good thing. We should all be willing to challenge and reevaluate our own beliefs without assuming the one challenging us is some grifter or right-wing pawn. I think it makes us smarter and mentally stronger. Now, with that out of the way, let's hear Coleman out on the direction he believes policy should go in America.
The default right now in a lot of areas of policy is to use Black and Hispanic identity as a proxy for disadvantage. And my argument is that you actually get a better picture of who needs help by looking at socioeconomics and income. That picks out people in a more accurate way.
Not my question, but when you say that socioeconomics picks out people in a better way than race, when you do look at the socioeconomics, you see the huge disparity between white households and Black households. You see the huge disparity between white households and Hispanic households. So your argument, and I've read your book twice because I wanted to give it a chance, your argument that race has no place in that equation is really fundamentally flawed.
Look, I think Sunny Hostin's lack of logic here is what's fundamentally flawed. Just keeping it real. It's somewhat strange how triggered she is by the notion that we should focus economic policies on class rather than identity like race. I assure you there are plenty of poor people of all races in America. However, she herself is a wealthy woman of color, so maybe class-based issues don't appeal to her the same way as they would for the working poor in America. And while it is true that Black and Latino Americans are more economically disadvantaged on average, it's also true that class-based policies would disproportionately benefit their lives without leaving poor white Americans behind. Why is that a bad thing? Don't we want to see all of our fellow Americans succeed, regardless of religion, race, gender, sexual orientation, etc.? Class-based economic policies have more buy-in among voters and tend to be harder to repeal because they're applied to everyone impacted by poverty. Coleman managed to maintain his composure, something that he's insanely skilled in, and responded, in my opinion, perfectly.
There's two separate questions. One is whether each racial group is socioeconomically the same. That I agree with you, they're not.
Yeah, they're not, and the stats show that.
Yeah, of course, I agree with that fully. The question is, how do you address that in the way that actually targets poverty the best?
Great.
And what Martin Luther King wrote in his book, Why We Can't Wait, is he called it, we need a Bill of Rights for the disadvantaged. And he said, yes, we should address racial inequality. Yes, we should address the legacy of slavery. But the way to do that is on the basis of class. And that will disproportionately target Blacks and Hispanics because they're disproportionately poor, but it will be doing so in a way that also helps the white poor, in a way that addresses poverty as the thing to be addressed.
He's right. I mean, I think he makes really good points there. But look, maybe Sunny Hostin has a counterpoint that we haven't even considered. So let's keep an open mind and give her a chance to respond.
You claim that color blindness was the goal of the civil rights movement, based upon Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, content of character versus the color of skin. He also said in 1968, it was about less than a week before he was assassinated, this country never stops to realize that they owe a people kept in slavery for 244 years. So rather than class, he did write about that earlier on. Right before his death, he made the argument for racial equality and racial reparations. And so your argument for color blindness, I think, is something that the right has co-opted.
The quote that you just pointed out about doing something special for the Negro, that's from the book Why We Can't Wait that I just mentioned.
Yes.
A couple paragraphs later, he lays out exactly what that something special was, and it was the Bill of Rights for the Disadvantaged, a broad class-based policy.
But he also says you must include race.
No, he didn't. He says it's
yes, he does.
Okay, well, everyone should go read the book Why We Can't Wait.
I gotta say, I mean, I didn't notice until this very moment, but the fact that she's rejecting class-based politics while wearing a Gucci button down and a Gucci belt is hilarious. But nonetheless, disagreements about MLK tend to, drive me crazy. But Coleman is correct to point out the class-based politics that the civil rights leader espoused. In fact, mainstream discussions about MLK tend to leave out his views on class politics.
A lot of mainstream media don't give you honest news. We do. You know why? Because of you. Paid membership on YouTube makes all the difference. Hit the join button below, and you become the hero that sustains us.
And by the way, I think what Coleman is saying is evidenced by the policies that MLK was pushing for, including a universal basic income. It was a universal basic income, meaning that it would apply to everyone regardless of their race. And I wish Coleman and Hostin's conversation centered more on the most effective policies to move this country forward. But unfortunately, that was the end of the substantive exchange, or at least the substantive portion of their exchange. The back and forth unfortunately devolved from there.
Many in the Black community, if I'm being honest with you, because I want to be, believe that you are being used as a pawn by the right and that you're a charlatan of sorts.
He's not a Republican.
So how do you?
He's never voted for a Republican.
You said that you're a conservative.
No,
you did. You actually said that in a podcast that you did 2 weeks ago.
I said I was a conservative.
He's not.
Yes, you did. So, but my question to you is, how do you respond to those critics?
I don't think I've been co-opted by anyone. I've only voted twice, both for Democrats. Although I'm an independent, I would vote for a Republican, probably a non-Trump Republican if they were compelling. I don't think there's any evidence I've been co-opted by anyone, and I think that that's an ad hominem tactic people use to not address really the important conversations we're having here. And I think it's better, and it would be better for everyone if we stuck to the topics rather than make it about me.
Look, at a time when someone like Donald Trump has increased his support among Black voters, I feel like maybe it's important to hear Coleman out a little bit, right? He's not a Trump supporter by any means, but are we just going to brush off, people of color who vote Republican as pawns for the right wing? How insanely insulting is that? I think it's more important to understand their arguments, no? And I think you'd have to know about Coleman's background to understand his politics. I'm not kidding when I say I listen to his podcast and I'm a fan of his. It's true that he has never voted for a Republican, even though he considers himself an independent. He's in his 20s and was raised by a Marxist mother who unfortunately and tragically has since passed away. His father, however, was not a Marxist. And on his podcast, he shares stories of spirited debates in his household. And I'm guessing the two opposing political views in his household led to independent thinking, the independent thinking that he tends to demonstrate. You might not agree with the overall thesis of his book, and that's totally fine, that's okay. But immediately dismissing someone who has a different worldview as a pawn or a grifter without addressing the substance of what he's saying is pretty weak. There are bad faith people out there, there's no question. There are grifters, but in my opinion, they're pretty easy to suss out. They have a difficult time explaining themselves. Coleman speaks at length about what he believes, explains why he has these views, and has never been disrespectful to anyone who disagrees with him. I think political discourse in the country would be far better if all aspired to that. Coleman has an open invitation on this show because I actually find it valuable to have him further elaborate on his views, especially the views that he espouses in that book, even if we have areas of disagreement. So Coleman, come on the show, talk about your book. I don't think you're a pawn. And I do think this is an important conversation to have, right? Is color blindness a better approach to improving race relations in the country? Should we focus on race-based economic policies or class-based economic policies? I get it, these are controversial issues, people get super heated, but you gotta put your differences aside, keep an open mind, and engage in a genuine and good faith exchange of ideas. And I'm not saying, that in an effort to launder like some right-wing militia members. I'm saying that in regard to someone who is incredibly thoughtful. And so if you're not familiar with Coleman Hughes, I would hate for Sunny Hostin to paint a picture of him. I would argue that you should listen to his podcast and get to know who he really is before judging his character.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat, emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.